So I want to do an addendum to the video I just did. I actually did go through the FBI crime statistics, and as best as I could, I found what was the white non-Hispanic homicide rate for 2019 in the US. Now, here's the thing. Okay, it's Table 43. That's the well-known table for race and crime, according to FBI statistics. The most recent one I could find was 2019. For some reason, I couldn't find this table for any year afterward. Maybe they discontinued it. So what I had to do, it was a very complicated process. As I said, the FBI, their total numbers for perpetrators of homicide, they divide everybody into 5 categories, which is white, black, Asian, Native American, and then Pacific Islander. So everybody is divided somehow into these 5 categories, including mixed race people, including Hispanic people, including people who don't really fall into any of these groups. Somehow they're divided into these 5 categories, all of them. To my understanding, the Hispanics are all put, or nearly all put, under the white category. They're definitely not being put, okay, they obviously wouldn't be under the Asian category. Very few Asian Hispanics. They wouldn't be under the Pacific Islander category. You might think intuitively that they could be under the Native American category, but they're actually, I don't think many are, because the Native American category in total was like much smaller, like very small compared to the people who are labeled as Hispanic. Now, the Hispanic, as I said, it wasn't one of those categories. It was a separate question. It's very convoluted, but I believe all the Hispanics are counted as white. And even if they're not, I think the vast majority are, because they couldn't be being counted as Native American in large numbers because the Native American numbers were so small. They couldn't have been maybe a few were counted as black. I don't know. But anyway, what I did was I added all the numbers for non-white homicide perpetrators, and then I subtracted the total Hispanic number from the total white number. And from that, I got the number of white homicide perpetrators for 2019. Now, the thing is, one thing to keep in mind, a huge discrepancy here is that homicide perpetrators doesn't include that. That doesn't cover the total homicide rate, because you have to factor in the fact that many homicides are unsolved and the perpetrator is never caught. Now, also another thing that so to find the total number of murderers, you would have to account for all the unsolved homicides. Because the total homicide rate includes homicides where the perpetrator is never caught. So what I did was I extrapolated from the total homicide rate, and I assumed that the proportion of uncaught perpetrators is the same for whites as it is for everyone else. Now, that is a big assumption. There could be a higher percentage of uncaught perpetrators for I don't even know what race. It's hard to say. But if you make that extrapolation, and another important thing when doing my math I noted was that the total population these FBI statistics came from was like 229 million. That's very different. The total the total US population for that year is almost 100 million. I think like 90 million more. So there must be like certain jurisdictions of the country that just were not counted in these statistics. So I had to account for that also when doing my math, because the total population for 2019 was like 319 million or something like that. So yeah, when taking all this into account and assuming that all Hispanics were counted as white, which again, I don't know, maybe a few of the Hispanics were not counted as white, which would mean that this number should be a little bit higher. And when adjusting for unsolved murders, when doing all that math, I got the number 1.74 per 100,000 as being the non-Hispanic white murder rate for 2019. So that's actually a little bit lower. My guesstimate that I pulled out of my ass was between 2 and 3 per 100,000. But one thing to keep in mind is that the overall homicide rate in 2019 was 5 per 100,000 for the US, but in 2020, 2021, 2022, it got significantly higher. In fact, it actually peaked, I think, in 2021 at 6.8 per 100,000, and then I think in 2022 it was 6.4. So that's one thing to keep in mind, because my guesstimates for the total white non-Hispanic homicide rate were mostly based on statistics from 2021 and 2022. So the number I got, 1.74 per 100,000, would be the 2019 number, and it would have increased significantly since. Now keep in mind, in Europe, the homicide rate hasn't increased as much in the last few years compared to in the United States. As I said, the Europe numbers I had were almost entirely 2021, 2022, with the exception of UK, which is 2020. Now, Canada has also seen increases in the last few years along a similar trajectory to the United States, but I did not include Canada in this comparison. So yeah, overall, when even still though, when looking at this 2019 number, 1.74 per 100,000, that's my guesstimate. That's not really a guesstimate. It is a number that I got from running the numbers, the FBI numbers. So yes, 1.74 per 100,000 for 2019. The only guesstimate percentage is the unsolved ones, because I'm assuming that unsolved homicides, like the same percentage of homicides are unsolved proportionate to each race, like which could be untrue. It could be that like maybe blacks get away with it more, maybe whites get away with it more, you know, we don't know. So that I had to make a guesstimate there. So 1.74, so it's assuming that the unsolved homicide rate reflects the homicide rate for solved homicides. That's what I'm saying. It assumes that like the same percentage of unsolved homicide perpetrators exists for each race as the percentage of solved homicide perpetrators, which we don't know. It is making a bit of a guess. So say, for instance, if like, what I'm saying is like, let's say if like 54% or whatever of homicide perpetrators of solved homicides are blacks, this assumes that it's also 54% for unsolved homicides. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, that's how my math went into this. So yeah, 1.74 per 100,000. A bit lower than my guesstimate, but again, as I said, this is for 2019, and the homicide rate has increased in recent years. Not only that, but even that being said, that 1.74 is still higher than the total homicide rate of every Western European country, with the exception of the microstates. Significantly higher, in fact, because as I said, the highest was Luxembourg at 1.5, which barely counts as not being a microstate. And then the next highest after that was Finland at 1.2. And again, these statistics for Europe are 2021, 2022, whereas the one for the US is for 2019. And it's definitely increased in the US since then, whereas I believe in Europe, the homicide rates have remained fairly stagnant between 2019 and 2021-22. I don't think they've increased significantly. I don't think they've decreased significantly. I could be wrong, but either way. So yes, this finding does support the idea that the white homicide rate is still significantly higher in the US compared to in Europe. And like I said, I repeat again, these European statistics are the total homicide rate for everyone in these Western European countries, including non-whites. So you'd have to factor that into account also. So yeah,